The night was electric with flashing cameras, voices rising in chaos as a man in uniform stood cornered, his arrogance collapsing into fear. And in the center of it all, a black woman, calm, unyielding, her presence cutting through the storm like a blade of light. "This isn't about a car," she said, her voice steady enough to silence the crowd. "This is about dignity under the law." What led to this moment? How did a simple drive through a wealthy neighborhood ignite a scandal that shook the city and exposed secrets powerful people wanted buried? Stay with us until the very end, because this story will test the limits of justice, pride, and even love. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss our next powerful stories, and tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching from. Now let's begin. The late afternoon sun burned across the polished glass of the boutique's tall windows, scattering golden light onto the quiet cobblestone street. Jasmine Mitchell stepped out of her sleek black Lamborghini, heels clicking against the pavement, her tailored blazer framing her figure with sharp precision. She locked the car with a single touch and breathed in the air of wealth that clung to this corner of the city. The Aventador glistened like a predator at rest, its engine's echo still vibrating in her chest. For Jasmine, it was more than a car. It was proof of every sleepless night, every closed door she had forced open, every condescending glance she had turned into fuel. She reached for her phone, scrolling through a list of reminders, when the sound of footsteps pulled her attention away. The tone of the street shifted. A presence anchored itself behind her. She lifted her eyes and found the weight of a uniform staring back. Officer Carter stood only a few feet away, his posture rigid yet dripping with arrogance, his badge catching the sunlight with blinding force. His gaze dragged over the Lamborghini, then back to her face, sharp and accusatory. "That's quite the car for someone like you." The words weren't loud, but they slashed through the quiet with cruel intent. Jasmine's jaw tightened. Years of boardroom dismissals and polite insults had taught her restraint, but the sting never dulled. She slipped her phone into her designer bag, met his stare, and answered evenly. "Excuse me?" Carter adjusted his belt, his smirk curling into something venomous. "You don't exactly look like you belong in this part of town driving that kind of vehicle." His tone carried the weight of every assumption, every unspoken prejudice wrapped in authority. The street seemed to lean closer, the silence growing heavier around them. She forced her voice to remain steady, cutting but calm. "I wasn't aware this neighborhood had a dress code or a preferred demographic for ownership." For a moment his smirk faltered, but it returned just as quickly, feeding on her defiance. "Let's cut to the chase. Is this your vehicle?" She crossed her arms, the movement deliberate. "It is. Is there a problem?" His eyes flicked between her and the car as if daring her to prove herself. "I'm going to need to see your license, registration, and proof of ownership. We've had reports of stolen vehicles in the area." The accusation hung in the air, absurd and transparent. Jasmine raised a brow. "By stolen vehicles, you mean this one? Or is this just a random check?" He shrugged, smugness dripping from every word. "It's a procedure. If you've got nothing to hide, you won't mind complying." Suppressing the urge to roll her eyes, Jasmine opened her bag, her hands moving with precision born of repetition. She pulled out a slim leather folder, presenting it without a word. Carter took it with deliberate slowness, flipping through the documents without care. Her name stared back from every line. Jasmine Mitchell, owner, insured, taxpayer. Yet he barely glanced before shoving them back. "Forgery isn't uncommon. Where'd you really get this car?" She stepped closer, her voice sharpening into steel. "I bought it new. Would you like the receipt too? Or is this where you tell me I don't look right for it?" His grin widened, mocking, emboldened by the tension. "Look, I don't want any trouble, ma'am, but this car is suspicious, and I'm going to have to impound it until we can verify its ownership." The words dropped like a hammer. Jasmine's blood ran cold, her fists curling at her sides. "You've got to be kidding me." Her voice was low, dangerous. But Carter wasn't joking. "Not kidding. Step aside unless you'd like to escalate this further." He spoke as though every ounce of power in the world was his to wield. Her instincts screamed to fight back, but reason whispered restraint. She had seen what happened to those who challenged arrogance draped in a badge. Slowly she moved aside, each step heavy with suppressed fury. Her heels cracked against the stone like gunfire, echoing her warning. "You're making a mistake. A big one." He chuckled, ignoring her, as if her words were nothing but background noise. A tow truck rounded the corner, summoned at his command, its rusty growl shattering the boutique's polished atmosphere. The driver glanced at Carter, then at her, uncertainty flickering across his face. But Carter's nod silenced it. Chains clinked, metal scraped, and Jasmine's car was hoisted onto the flatbed as though it were nothing more than evidence, not the embodiment of years of sacrifice. The street was filled with whispers. Strangers paused, some pulling out phones, others shaking their heads. A group of boutique shoppers lingered by the door, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and disdain. Among them stood a tall figure, tailored suit cut to perfection, his sunglasses shielding eyes that studied the unfolding scene with detached interest. He leaned casually against a gleaming Bentley, his posture oozing the confidence of wealth. Whispers carried his name, Ethan Cross, the billionaire playboy, the man whose investments owned half the block. His lips curved into a faint smile, not of joy but of entertainment. To him it was a performance. To Jasmine, it was her dignity being paraded through the streets. She glanced at him briefly, her fury meeting his amusement, then turned back to Carter as the officer slid behind the wheel of her car to drive it onto the tow platform. The engine roared, a sound that once filled her with pride now cutting her open like betrayal. Carter revved the Lamborghini, relishing in the growl of stolen power, as though he had claimed a prize. The sight churned Jasmine's stomach, but she stood firm, back straight, face unreadable. Rage burned in her chest, but she refused to gift him her breaking point. She knew men like him thrived on it, on seeing composure fracture. Instead, she pulled her phone from her bag once more, her hand steady. Her thumb hovered briefly, then pressed. A call rang through. A voice answered, muted but clear. She kept her tone even, her eyes locked on Carter behind the wheel. "It's me." He took the bait. "Activate the failsafe." She ended the call, sliding the phone back into her bag, her lips curving into the faintest of smiles. She planted her heels on the pavement, the sound echoing her resolve. The game had just begun. The city's pulse quickened as night settled, neon lights bleeding across glass towers and casting fractured reflections on wet pavement. Jasmine sat in her apartment, the blinds half drawn, her laptop glowing against the dimness. The GPS tracker she had installed months ago pulsed steadily on the screen, a crimson dot moving with purpose. Carter hadn't taken the Lamborghini to the precinct's lot. He was behind the wheel himself, tearing through streets he had no right to own. Jasmine leaned closer, her jaw set, each movement on the map a reminder that power wasn't stolen, it was exposed. Her fingers brushed the keys as she saved the feed and transferred it onto an encrypted drive. Preparation was her armor, and tonight she would not be caught unarmed. Outside, the city hummed with noise. Yet inside her chest, there was only the steady rhythm of resolve. She heard a knock at the door, sharp against the silence, and tension shot through her. Few people dared to come unannounced. She opened it to find Ethan Cross standing casually, a tailored coat draped over his shoulders, his expression unreadable behind eyes that seemed to weigh everything and reveal nothing. "Word travels fast," he said, stepping past her threshold without waiting for permission. His cologne mixed with the faint scent of coffee and leather that filled her apartment. Jasmine narrowed her eyes, shutting the door with deliberate slowness. "You don't strike me as the type who knocks out of courtesy." Ethan glanced at the screen, where the red dot traced Carter's route, and raised an eyebrow. "You installed a leash on your toy. Clever." His words carried both admiration and provocation. Jasmine folded her arms, refusing to be baited. "It's not a toy, it's evidence." Ethan chuckled, pacing slowly through her space, studying the carefully arranged books and steel gray furniture. Everything about him radiated leisure, yet beneath it lay an alertness she couldn't ignore. "You're playing a dangerous game. Officers like Carter don't fall alone. When they stumble, entire walls collapse, and the people behind those walls don't forgive." Jasmine stepped forward, her gaze burning into him. Then maybe it's time someone tested their foundation. His smile faltered for the first time, his amusement replaced by a flicker of something more serious. He leaned closer, his voice dropping. You're not the only one who knows how deep this rot goes. I've seen board members cut checks to keep things buried. I've watched friends dragged under when they tried to surface it. You think you're ready for what happens when you shine too much light? Jasmine's pulse quickened, but she held her ground. I don't think. I know. The certainty in her voice sliced the air between them. Ethan studied her, as if searching for a crack, some hesitation he could exploit. Yet all he found was fire. For a moment, silence filled the room, heavy and unyielding. Then Ethan exhaled, pulling a slim tablet from his coat pocket and sliding it onto the table. The screen flickered to life, displaying financial transfers, coded memos, and timestamps tied to Carter's precinct. Jasmine froze, her eyes darting across the data. Each number, each signature was a thread in a larger web. She lifted her gaze to him, suspicion lacing her tone. Why show me this? What do you gain? He shrugged, his smirk returning, though softer this time. Maybe I'm tired of being the man everyone thinks I am. Or maybe I don't like watching people like you crushed for sport. Her instinct screamed not to trust him. Ethan Cross was a man who thrived on excess, whose photographs filled tabloids alongside champagne flutes and nameless models. Yet in that moment, she saw something else, something hidden behind the mask of wealth. The documents weren't fabricated. Her trained eye knew genuine records when she saw them. Still, doubt coiled inside her. If you think this buys my gratitude, you're mistaken. I don't need your charity. Ethan's eyes darkened, his smirk vanishing into seriousness. It's not charity, it's survival. You want Carter? Fine. But Carter is just a soldier. I'm showing you the generals. The words cut deep, heavier than she expected. Jasmine stepped back, her mind already racing, linking Carter's reckless arrogance to the names that suddenly loomed on the screen. A cold shiver ran down her spine, not from fear, but from the magnitude of what lay ahead. The red dot on her screen shifted abruptly, veering off the main boulevard into an industrial district. Jasmine snapped back to the moment, her hand tightening on the mouse. He's moving off route, she muttered. Ethan leaned over her shoulder, his voice low but steady. That's no accident. He's not joyriding anymore. He's meeting someone. The thought settled like ice in her stomach. Every instinct urged her to follow, to confront. But reason cautioned patience. Evidence meant more than fury. She copied the feed onto another drive, sliding it into a secure case, her motions precise. Ethan watched, his expression unreadable. You're relentless, but relentless people end up with targets on their backs. Jasmine turned, her eyes locked on his. Then let them aim. I don't bend. Her words struck harder than she intended, yet the truth of them reverberated through her bones. The sound of traffic drifted in through the window, muffled yet insistent, as though the city itself urged her forward. She gathered her bag, tucking the drive inside, every movement sharp with intention. Ethan blocked her path, his hand resting lightly on the doorframe. You can't do this alone. The challenge in his tone was clear, but so was the warning. Jasmine met him head-on, refusing to look away. I've done everything alone, and I've survived. His jaw clenched, the mask of playboy arrogance slipping enough for her to glimpse the man beneath. Maybe, but survival isn't the same as winning. The tension between them crackled like electricity, neither willing to yield. Finally, Jasmine brushed past him, her heels striking the floor with defiance. Then watch me. Ethan followed her into the hallway, his voice echoing after her. You think I don't know what it costs to stand up against them? I've lost more than you realize. She didn't stop, but the weight of his words lingered, threading into her thoughts as she descended the stairs. Outside, the night air wrapped around her like a cloak, cool and biting. She hailed a cab, the lights of the city streaking across her window as she pressed the encrypted case against her chest. Beside her, Ethan slid into the backseat uninvited, his presence unavoidable. They didn't speak, but the silence between them was no longer dismissive. It was charged, fragile, and undeniable. An alliance neither of them had chosen, yet both understood was necessary. The following morning unfolded like a storm tearing through glass. Headlines screamed from every screen in Jasmine's office. Her name splashed across feeds beside grainy stills of Carter behind the wheel of her Lamborghini. The video she leaked through her attorney had already gone viral. Carter's smug face caught in dashboard reflections, his badge glinting while he revved the stolen car. Social media exploded with outrage, hashtags piling up, voices demanding accountability. Yet beneath the noise ran another current, sharp and insidious. Whispers questioning Jasmine, implying she staged the evidence, suggesting she used wealth and race to provoke. She scrolled through the comments, her hands steady, though the bile rising in her throat reminded her that truth was never enough on its own. Ethan leaned against her desk, his jacket unbuttoned, his phone vibrating with messages from investors. His smirk was absent this time. Instead, his jaw was tight, his posture restless. "You've poked the beast," he muttered, tossing his phone onto the polished wood. "The precinct's already circling wagons, and my board is furious I'm standing anywhere near you." Jasmine didn't look up from her screen. "Your board fears headlines more than justice." His eyes narrowed, but he didn't deny it. He paced, his polished shoes tapping against the marble floor, a sound that grated against the tension in the room. "They're threatening to freeze projects, pull funding, and spin me as reckless. If I don't back away, they'll make sure I bleed money faster than I can earn it." Jasmine finally met his gaze, her eyes unflinching. "So walk away, Ethan. Protect your empire. I didn't ask you to stay." For a moment, silence pressed between them, heavy with challenge. Then he shook his head, almost laughing at the absurdity. "And let them win? No, not this time." Her attorney, a wiry man named Franklin with steel gray hair, stepped into the room carrying a stack of folders. He spread them out on the table, pages of financial records, testimonies, and internal reports that Ethan had provided the night before. "This isn't just misconduct," Franklin said, his voice taut with urgency. "It's systemic. Carter's file connects to payouts from local developers, hush money funneled through shell accounts, cover-ups that go back years." Jasmine flipped through the papers, the weight of each document pressing heavier than the last. Her stomach twisted, not from fear, but from recognition. She had always known the rot ran deep, but seeing it in ink was different. It was undeniable. "We take this public," she said, her voice low but fierce. Franklin hesitated. "Once it's out, there's no going back. They will come after you with everything they have." Jasmine closed the folder, her eyes burning. "Then let them. I refuse to be silent." Hours later, she stood outside the courthouse, flashes from cameras exploding like lightning in her face. Reporters shouted questions, their voices overlapping in a chaotic chorus. Ethan walked beside her, his presence a shield and a liability, his tailored suit immaculate despite the chaos. Franklin spoke to the press, laying out the timeline, presenting evidence of Carter's abuse of power and the financial links tying him to a broader scheme. The crowd roared with questions, microphones thrust forward like weapons. Jasmine stepped up, her voice cutting through the clamor. "This is not about one car or one officer. This is about a system that believes it can strip dignity from those it deems unworthy. I will not let that stand, not for me and not for anyone else." The square fell silent for a breath, the weight of her words anchoring the noise into stillness. Cameras caught every flicker of determination on her face. The silence broke when a reporter shouted, "Isn't it true you provoked this to gain attention? Isn't this about publicity?" Laughter rippled through the crowd from skeptics. Jasmine's spine stiffened, but before she could respond, Ethan stepped forward. His voice rang with an edge that surprised even her. She didn't need to stage anything. The truth was enough. "You want to question someone? Question the man who thought flashing a badge made him untouchable." His defense stunned the crowd, not because of what he said, but because of who he was. Ethan Cross, the man headlines painted as reckless and indifferent, was taking a side that risked everything his empire stood on. The flashbulbs turned, hungry for his defiance, capturing the unlikeliest of alliances. Jasmine shot him a glance, half wary, half grateful. But she said nothing. Some truths needed no words. By evening, the story dominated the nation. Carter was suspended pending investigation, yet the precinct issued statements dripping with denial. Anonymous sources whispered to journalists that Jasmine was difficult, manipulative, and using race and wealth as shields. TV pundits debated her credibility while Carter's defenders framed him as a victim of entrapment. Each headline twisted like a blade, each smear attempt calculated to tarnish her fight. Jasmine watched the broadcast from her apartment, the glow of the television reflecting against her tired eyes. Ethan sat across from her, scrolling through his phone, reading the backlash against himself. "They're tearing me apart," he said quietly, his usual bravado stripped bare. "But I don't care. For once, I'm on the right side of the story." Jasmine studied him, seeing the cracks in his armor. Perhaps he wasn't just a playboy chasing a thrill. Perhaps he was a man rediscovering what it meant to matter. That night, threats seeped through the cracks. An unmarked envelope slid under her door, contained nothing but a photo of her standing on the courthouse steps, a red X scrawled across her face. Her pulse hammered, but she refused to show fear. She burned the photo in her sink, the smoke curling like a vow. Ethan watched her, his jaw tightening. "They won't stop. The more you push, the more they'll come." She met his eyes, her voice steady. "Then let them come. I've survived worse, and now I'm not alone." For the first time, he didn't smirk, didn't argue. He simply nodded as if conceding to her truth. Together, they stood in the flickering light of the burning paper. Two unlikely allies bound not by trust, but by necessity and resolve. The scandal had erupted, and there was no turning back. The air outside City Hall hung thick with the threat of rain, a humid weight pressing against the courthouse square. Barricades groaned under the pressure of the crowd. Reporters with microphones thrust forward like spears, citizens clutching handmade signs, their faces a mix of hope and fury. The scent of wet stone and rusting metal mingled with the electric buzz of anticipation. Jasmine stood at the heart of it, her navy blazer tailored to a razor's edge, her dark hair pulled back tightly, betraying no hint of the chaos swirling within her. To her left, Franklin adjusted his glasses, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the storm around them. To her right, Ethan stood, his expensive suit out of place yet commanding, his presence a silent promise of amplification. In Jasmine's hands, a folder of FOIA documents, pages of damning evidence, felt light, yet their weight pressed against her chest like a vow kept after years of silence. The crowd surged as the microphones were positioned, a makeshift podium erected on the steps. Camera flashes erupted, blinding and relentless, turning the square into a kaleidoscope of light and shadow. Jasmine inhaled deeply, grounding herself in the memory of why she stood here. Not for the spectacle, not for revenge, but for the truth that had been buried too long. She glanced at Franklin, who nodded subtly, his signal to begin. He stepped forward, his voice cutting through the clamor with the precision of a surgeon's blade. "For years, Officer Daniel Carter has abused his authority," Franklin began, his tone measured yet unyielding. "Through Freedom of Information Act requests, we've uncovered financial ties between Carter, local developers, and city officials. Transactions that reek of corruption." He gestured to a screen behind them, flickering to life with grainy footage Jasmine had fought to secure. The video showed Carter behind the wheel of his gleaming Lamborghini, badge glinting under streetlights, his smirk a taunt to anyone watching. The crowd gasped, a collective intake of breath that rippled into murmurs, then shouts. The footage looped, Carter laughing, tossing a wad of cash onto the passenger seat, oblivious to the hidden camera. Jasmine's pulse quickened, not with fear, but with the raw surge of vindication. The truth was no longer hers to carry alone. Franklin continued, detailing the FOIA files. Bank records showing unexplained deposits, emails between Carter and a developer promising favors, and complaints from citizens dismissed without investigation. "This is not an isolated incident," he said. "It's a pattern of arrogance and impunity." As he spoke, 3 community witnesses stepped forward. A shopkeeper whose store was vandalized without police follow-up, a mother whose son faced Carter's harassment, and a retired teacher who'd been stonewalled when reporting extortion. Their voices trembled but held firm, each story a thread weaving a tapestry of systemic failure. The crowd's anger swelled, signs bobbing higher. No more corruption, and justice now. The press pounced, their questions sharp and relentless. Why should we trust your evidence? Isn't this a personal vendetta? A reporter shouted, her voice dripping with skepticism. Jasmine stepped to the podium, her heart pounding but her gaze steady. She wore no armor, only her conviction. This isn't about a car or a grudge, she said, her voice clear, slicing through the noise. This is about dignity stripped by arrogance, about a system that shields those who abuse their power. These documents, this footage, these voices, she gestured to the witnesses, are proof that no one, no matter their badge or title, is untouchable. Her words landed like stones in still water, ripples spreading through the square. For a moment, silence gripped the crowd, then erupted into cheers. Fists punched the air, chants of "Jasmine! Jasmine!" rising like a tide. A man in a suit pushed through the press line, his badge gleaming on his lapel, his voice booming with authority. This evidence is circumstantial at best, he declared, eyes narrowing. You're undermining the department with this circus. The crowd hissed, their anger a living thing. But Jasmine didn't flinch. She locked eyes with him, her voice cold as steel. Circumstantial? Your officer is on camera, flaunting corruption. A circus is pretending these patterns don't exist. The man's jaw clenched, his rebuttal faltering as the footage looped again. Carter's smirk a silent confession. Ethan stepped forward then, his presence commanding instant attention. You want to talk about undermining institutions? He said, his tone sharp, slicing through the official's bluster. Protecting corruption does more damage than exposing it. The public deserves better. Cameras swiveled to capture him, his wealth and notoriety lending weight to every syllable. The crowd roared, stunned by the billionaire's defiance, his alliance with Jasmine a twist no one saw coming. The square trembled with chants. Justice for all, the words rolling like thunder. Jasmine scanned the faces before her, a young man with a clenched fist, an elderly woman wiping tears, strangers bound by shared outrage and hope. She thought of the threats that had haunted her, the anonymous photo slipped under her door, a red X scrawled across her face, the smear campaigns painting her as a liar. Yet here she stood, unbroken, where fear had tried to erase her. Her throat tightened, but she raised her voice again, raw and unfiltered. This fight isn't just mine. It belongs to every person who's been told they don't belong, who's been silenced because speaking out was dangerous. Today is proof that silence will not win. Police officials scrambled to redirect questions, their promises of internal reviews met with boos and skepticism. The momentum had shifted. The crowd no longer trusted their platitudes. Within the hour, a city official took the podium, face grim, and announced Carter's immediate suspension pending investigation. Charges were forthcoming, he added, as news tickers began to blaze with the headline, Officer Daniel Carter suspended amid corruption allegations. The crowd's roar was deafening, a cathartic release that shook the square. Cameras caught Carter himself, standing at the edge of the crowd, his head bowed, his once cocky demeanor shattered. Jasmine stood tall, her chin lifted, pride etched into every line of her face as flashes lit her like a beacon. As the press conference wound down, reporters swarmed, hungry for more. Jasmine answered selectively, her words deliberate. This is not the end, she said. Carter is one man. Others believed they could bury the truth. They are wrong. Her voice carried a quiet fire, and the crowd's approval thundered back. The square began to empty, littered with soggy signs and trampled flyers, the air now heavy with rain. Jasmine remained on the steps, the downpour soaking her blazer, her hair, her skin. She let it wash over her, mingling with her exhaustion, her triumph, her grief for all it had cost to reach this moment. Ethan lingered nearby, his phone buzzing, ignored in his pocket. He approached slowly, rain streaking his face, his usual smirk absent. You've just painted a target on your back brighter than ever, he said quietly, his voice almost lost in the storm. Jasmine turned, her lips curving into a faint, resolute smile. Then let them aim. I'm still standing. For a moment, they stood in silence, the rain a curtain around them. Then, almost imperceptibly, Ethan reached for her hand, his fingers brushing hers in a gesture not of romance, but of solidarity, a shared recognition of the fight ahead. It wasn't a fairy tale moment, but the start of something deeper, forged in courage and necessity. Jasmine's gaze drifted to the square, where a few stragglers remained, their signs defiant even in the rain. She thought of the witnesses, the shopkeeper, the mother, the teacher, whose stories had given her evidence weight. She thought of the FOIA files, each page a battle won through sleepless nights. And she thought of the faces in the crowd, their voices now part of her own. This isn't a victory for one person, she said, her voice steady despite the rain. It's the first step for everyone who's been dismissed, ignored, or broken. We're just beginning. The cameras, relentless even in the storm, captured her silhouette against the gray sky, her posture unyielding. Across the square, Carter slunk away, his badge no longer a shield. The city would talk of this day for years, the day truth broke through, carried by a woman who refused to bend, flanked by allies who chose to stand when walking away would have been easier. Jasmine let the rain fall, her heart steady, her resolve unshakable. The fight was far from over, but for now, the truth had won its first battle. In the end, this story was never just about a stolen car or a single corrupt officer. It was about dignity, the quiet, unshakable truth that no badge, no wealth, no title can erase the worth of a human being. Justice is not a gift handed down by the powerful. It is a right that must be defended, even when the cost is high. And love, real love, isn't found in glittering parties or fleeting praise. It's revealed when someone chooses to stand beside you in the fire, when they risk their own world to protect yours. Carter was only the beginning, a symptom of a system that believes silence can bury truth. The real battle is still ahead, and voices like Jasmine's remind us it can be won. What about you? How did this story speak to you? Share your thoughts in the comments, let us know where you're listening from, and don't forget to subscribe. Thank you for being here, and until next time.